Welcome to the Unmuted Podcast. My name is Jeff, and I am the host of this podcast where we talk about all things HR tech, world of work. So all of our guests are HR leaders, practitioners, TA leaders, HR tech experts, and so on. And they're primarily in Canada, but also in the US and then overseas also. So these episodes live on our website at GoScale.com, which, by the way, is going to be brand new next month. We have a brand new website coming, and also on our YouTube channel. So if you want to just hit a subscribe or a like, so you can get notified when there's new episodes that are usually dropped every Thursday morning. So we try to be weekly. So this is a really good topic here. It's called Evolving Your EVP, How to Stay Competitive in Changing Market. So we have a fantastic guest, Michelle Brooks, who I've known for a long time. We're going to bring her in just a minute. And, fun fact about her is, so she works for a fantastic company called Security Compass, and I used to work there. We're going to be talking about the employee value proposition. And I just want to make just a couple of points first, just to frame the conversation, and then we'll bring in our guest. And so I think the first point is called the EVP misconception. So many companies think of it as quite static. So they go through an exercise, they come up with something, and then they just, plaster it on the website, plaster it on the wall, whatever, and they just go like this, and they think they're done, right? Well, sorry, my friends, that's not the truth. You should never be done. But it's supposed to be dynamic. It's supposed to be always evolving. It's supposed to be reflecting or shifting a market conditions, workforce expectations, a competitive landscape. And so today we're going to explore about how organizations can actually adapt them. Okay, and so, but doing so and not losing sight of their core values. That's the first point. The second point is the stakes are high. We are in a volatile market, and I think that, in part what's happening to our friendly neighbors to the south, and then also other sort of issues around the world. So your EVP is not just about attracting talent, right? That's part of it, but it's also about retention, employee engagement, business resilience. You need to touch on every part of the employee life cycle, and then also the experience as well. So companies that fail to actually do that, risk losing top talent. And I always go back to this one example. I'm not going to name the company, but I worked for many years ago, did a great job on the talent attraction part of it, but completely did nothing on the engagement and the retention part. So they did really good at that top of the funnel, getting new candidates in the pipeline, hired some great people. They came in and said, oops, this isn't what I expected. And they all leave. Shocker. And so I think it's really important that it needs to be filtered all the way through. And I think that's the second point. And so, this is not about me. So this is about our guest. So Michelle Brooks, it's great to have you on the Unmuted podcast for the second time, sort of, right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, we did a little thing at the Tech Talent North conference a couple years ago where we all sat down at a table and we just sort of shot the breeze, I guess. And there were short little episodes, but this is your first full one, so welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jeff. It's great to be here. It's a real honor. I've seen some really great HR leaders of all different organizations, different roles be here, so it's great.
Fantastic. And so we've known each other for a long time, I think. It's probably pushing 20 years, which or
Thanks.
longer. I mean, I've been in Toronto for over 20 years now, so it's probably been about that long. And so maybe you can just tell us a bit about what you do.
Yeah, for sure. So currently the Chief People and Culture Officer at Security Compass, which is a cybersecurity software company here in Toronto. And I will be there with them almost 7 years. It's the longest time I've ever stayed anywhere, which says something about the organization and the culture and the people. But in terms of my career, I really did start in the recruitment space. So I have a passion for all things employer branding, TA, and then of course have evolved to doing more head of people type of roles and spent a lot of time really in tech scale ups. That's where I've really spent the last 10, 15 years of my career. I'm also, as an aside, started an advisory practice, which is really focused mostly on coaching of either HR leaders, founders, as well as other senior leaders, and some tidbits of HR fractional work as well.
So fantastic. So we'll share your website. So you have a website, obviously, and so we'll post it on, on our page, for everyone. So let's dive into our first topic. So in simple terms, what is an EVP and why should we care?
Yeah, so an employer value proposition is essentially just a defined message that really helps you convey what you have to offer at your organization for either candidates who are considering joining as well as for your existing team members. And so that can take a lot of different forms. Often we'll think of it almost like as a pitch, like, let me tell you about Security Compass and why it's great and all the great things. But underneath that pitch are all of the full details of that particular organization and all that it has to offer. And so it's really important to have this defined and that it's well understood by both the hiring teams as well as the managers, so that when they're doing their hiring, there's an alignment piece and that we make sure that we're hiring folks that are aligned to the way we actually are at our organization, and that we're continuing to make people aware of what the organization is offering them. Because we all know, even when you are at an employer, there's always something out there on LinkedIn or something, or you hear from a colleague. And so having true understanding of what is the value your organization is giving you as an employee is important to keep top of mind.
And I think a lot of people get it confused. I mean, it's not about the perks that you offer, right? I mean, it's much more than that. I think a lot of people get confused by it. And this isn't a new concept. I mean, it's been around for a long time. I mean, I learned everything on the employer branding from this guy in Australia by the name of Brett mentioned, and so Brett taught me a lot of different things. He's like, Jeff, it's not the lipstick and perfume and cologne and all the rest of it. It's much more than that. So obviously, with the business climate that we're in now, things are moving fast. I mean, we've always had lots of change, but I think it's getting faster and faster now. So what are the biggest shifts that you're seeing right now in the expectations of employees, and should companies adapt their employee value prop?
Yeah, I think maybe I'll take a step back and first start with what does a good employer value prop look like? And I think you have to start with a foundational value prop that is truly authentic. What is great about working at your organization? Again, it's not, like you said, it's not like having a great foosball table or snacks in the office. No, we love those things. It is really about, if you're an organization that really values flexibility and gives a lot of like empowerment around how you spend your time, that is a really good pillar to highlight. So starting from a place of like true understanding of what is it that your organization offers and maybe what makes it unique in the marketplace. And if you start from that place of authenticity, that you have a good foundation, then I actually think that a lot of people don't do a good job of this. They maybe their EVP is really aspirational instead of founded in the reality of work.
Yeah.
So, but if you're starting from that point, then you know that it's something that's going to have to continually evolve just based on what's going on in the candidate market, as well as just what's going on in the macroeconomic climate. To answer your question now, what's going on in the world? Well, we know that there's a lot of challenges in terms of the economy, political unrest in North America, as well as all over the world. And what we're noticing is that is weighing really heavy on folks, understandably. And so one thing we're seeing of late is that people just don't have that sort of like emotional capacity to maybe manage more challenging things. So I noticed in terms of what we're seeing in the workplace as well as in the interview process, we're getting a lot more questions around like, how do you make decisions and what's your thought process around perhaps social justice issues? And those are things, if you go back 5 to 10 years, like, yeah, people wanted to understand how you made decisions, of course, but it's not necessarily something that was coming in interview processes. So we're seeing that as a change. I'll also say that this was more a couple years ago, but continues to be true, is that stability and financial wellness is coming up a lot more in these conversations. Where if you go back a couple of years ago, we were in the Great Resignation and people were jumping jobs for all the money and doing all these things. It was more about like money talks, what's the growth opportunity? Like, so that was a reaction to that particular market. But all of a sudden, when people started to do layoffs in the tech community, et cetera, you started to get a lot more questions about like, So are you cash flow positive? And are you a stable organization? When was the last time you did any cuts? And if you did, how did you make those decisions? And so we're getting that from candidates in process, as well as employees are asking for us to really peek behind the curtain about how decisions are made a lot more. So that's some of the things we're seeing as responding to this particular landscape. But I think what's really important with the EVP, again, it's got to be rooted in foundationally what is true for your organization, what stays true, but you have to constantly be revisiting it and making sure that as your organization evolves, that you're updating it and you're highlighting some of the things that are important in that landscape.
You talked about aspirational, right? So that's always a bit of a tricky sort of thing because obviously there is the reality now, but then, like organizations say, well, we want to be here. And then
Mhm.
you say, but you're not there yet, you're here. So how do you deal with that? Because it's really, just getting like a whiteboard. I mean, it's so easy just to write stuff down and just say, we're this, we're that. So how do you handle that sort of gap between what is real versus what you
Yeah.
want to aspire to?
And sorry, do you mean inside the EVP or
Yeah.
organizationally? Sorry, which?
Get the employee value prop.
Yeah, so I think for me, like the times, like I've worked in employer branding and the TA side for a really long time. And I have never worked in an organization that allowed us to spend a lot of money on building an EVP. So grassroots, how do we design and figure out what we even have to market? Like I always get that from the people who are living that
Yeah.
experience. Or I have my view, but my view is coming from my perspective, which is at a different point in the organization and in terms of roles. So I always start from building your EVP as what are people's true experiences. And I often start by doing a number of exercises that would start by like what made you join the company and what makes you stay as sort of some beginning exercises. And that really, if you really are trying and you're intentionally rooting your EVP development on the true lived experience of folks and you're getting it from the people instead of perhaps from leadership or from like what you saw at another company that looked really cool, then you almost don't get the aspirational pieces in there. Like you're not
Right. Okay.
inviting them to the party. So that is sort of the way I've approached it. And then when those aspirational things come in, then often it's, if you've created enough safety in your discussions with whomever you're developing this EVP with, you can also question that and just be like, is that
Yeah.
true? Or is it something we're halfway on the too true? Or is this maybe a bit aspirational? And if so, let's make a plan to make that a reality outside of our EVP. Let's instead have our EVP focused on the actual authentic experience.
So you talked about the next question, that I had was, so organizations out there trying to sort of rethink their employee value prop. What are some of the steps that they can possibly take to actually do that?
So I think there's two pieces. So first is if you already have an employer value prop, I would probably start by dusting it off because you probably haven't looked at it in a really long time. And take some time to really look at it and ask yourself, maybe you get a small team together, a diverse group of people from across the organization, different demographics, departments, levels, etc., to rip it apart a bit and ask them to add to it, edit what's still true, not true, etc. So I would start by starting an exercise that would focus on that. And again, giving them that instructions to stay rooted in the true lived experience. If you don't have one, then as I mentioned, I think it's really great to, again, grab a diverse group of humans and get them in a room or contributing in some way to explaining what they really love about where they work. And most often that is going to be representative of the candidate experience as well. So I think none of my suggestions are going to be go and spend $1 billion with a consultant and help them build that. I mean, if you have those dollars, maybe go for it. But if you do want to have an exercise, you can bring a consultant in to do that. There's lots of great people to do that. I know probably Jeff, you've done it. I'd be willing to do it. But my answer will always be you have to be out there talking to the people and they need to be actively involved. The minute you bring an external force in or you let your leadership team, which are employees and they should be involved, but they shouldn't be driving that process. So I guess short answer is listen to the people. right? Either edit it or start it from scratch, but it always has to start from the people who were living that.
I totally agree with that. I've done this a million times. And as soon as it is not centered around people like your employee, you've lost it. You've kiboshed it. And especially when, leaders want to get their hands on it. And it's like, no. Let's wait. Get out, right? So it's about employees, but I think they also have to feel safe too, to be able to share. It depends on where the organization is. Obviously, it's what's going on, because it can turn very quickly into a not constructive type of exercise. So you have to have that expertise to kind of bring them out of the rabbit's hole into something a bit more constructive. So I always ask a question about technology, because that's sort of where my brain naturally goes. And I'm going to ask you one. What role, if any, does AI and technology play in shaping a modern EVP, and then how can HR leaders leverage it effectively?
So I think there's a few ways that make sense. So first of all, like if you've done this exercise where you've done listening and you have it, you're going to have like all this information. And in the times where in the past where I was doing that or was working with a team that was doing that, we end up writing a lot. And so right away, there's a great use case for saying like, hey, I've got all of this data, like put it in this format for me and help it to compile the data and also to make it more manageable. Because I think like I've spent half my career in what might be like writing.
Oh.
So there's definitely tools, even just OpenAI, that can really help you compile large amounts of data. So I think that that's already saving a ton of time. I think the other piece there, and this is a little bit of a hot take on the EVP, is it's tempting that when you have an EVP, that again, it sounds like a pitch, right? So if I were to give you my pitch about Security Compass, I'm going to share with you like what I love about working there. Well, obviously what I love about working there might be certainly different. I've been there 7 years. I'm at the executive. I'm in people and culture. If you're a software developer, none of those things, like many of those things may not be relevant to you. So my hot take on EVPs in general, and I'll circle back to your technology question, I swear I'm going to answer it, is that what I think AI particularly can do for you is to take your big chunky messaging document that has all the amazing things about your organization organized into pillars and an overarching adorable message like all good messaging frameworks should have. But what it can do is that as I'm talking to you as a candidate, and I'm leading you through the process, and you're telling me, dropping all these breadcrumbs about what you care about, I think what AI can do is help us extract what should I put into my pitch for this particular person? And when I'm talking to them, what are the things I want to make sure that they know, either in my steps along the way or when I'm giving them the offer? What are the things I may want to hide? So I'll give an example. If you have a candidate who really cares about career growth and really wants to work with a strong mentor, example, my pitch probably wouldn't be, if I was talking about what I love about Security Compass, I wouldn't be talking about our learning and growth budget or the fact that we have a peer mentoring program in-house. Those are cool programs, trust me, but they're not the things that keep me lit up at work, right? I have different goals. I'm at a different point in my life. But what I think this can do is it can, like what technology or AI can do, is actually take that big, huge document and help me realize like, oh, I really want to highlight X, Y, and Z. I want to highlight those programs when I'm talking to this candidate. So I think there's an opportunity to save ourselves some time and also help sort of bring things into focus as we're talking to candidates to personalize the EVP for each particular candidate.
Yeah, so I was looking for you to say that word, personalized, because that's something that I've been saying for many years in terms of, branding in general is all about sort of personalizing experience. But now we have this thing called AI, which had just blown everything out of the water. And now you can hyper personalize things, because I was talking to someone last week about that. So what they've done is they've taken all of the actual interview conversations that they've captured from AI. They've mushed it with all of the work that they've done on values, on employee value prop, employer branding, and then all of the internal conversations around values and all that kind of stuff. And they've been able to segment it by role. I'm like, that's ingenious, because then now you can say, oh, so like, say I'm talking to like a CFO. then obviously the things I would talk about will be quite different theoretically. In terms of detail versus like a marketing coordinator or an HR generalist, right? So or customer success person. So you can start to get really personal based on demographic and age. Although I'm not saying just to make any assumptions, but obviously that data helped you that you can get really targeted with messaging, which was actually pretty cool. So they showed me in real time how it works, and I'm like, this is brilliant. So, technology needs to be your friend. And then, of course, obviously, like the old school stuff, like, social media channels are obviously good for brand channels and your career site and all that good jazz. So I'm sure that we can talk forever about this stuff. But if our viewers can take just one thing away, from what you've talked about today, so what would that thing be?
I think acknowledging that the landscape is forever changing and that means you need to be forever revisiting your employer value prop and making sure that it is taking into consideration what people are thinking and feeling right now. I think that's to me the number one thing. And then of course, customizing it. That would be the secondary piece.
That's perfect. Thank you, Michelle. So on that note, I just want to thank you for being here. And always enjoy talking to you. Please send my best to, the team at Security Compass. And thank you for being here. And once again, you can find Michelle at onwardadvisory.ca. And then once again, everyone, the Unmuted Podcast. I'm Jeff, your host. And these episodes live on GoScaleHR.com. Michelle, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Great to see you again.